The Zithar Collective had long been the undisputed masters of the galaxy. Their fleets conquered planets with ruthless efficiency. Their weapons were beyond the comprehension of most species, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything the known universe had ever seen. They had brought entire civilizations to their knees without breaking a sweat. But Earth was different. The humans here were still primitive by galactic standards. Their cities had only just begun to rise above the surface of their planet. Their technology was still in its infancy, yet something about Earth intrigued the Zithar Collective. It wasn't their cities or their weapons, but something far deeper, something intangible, a spark of resistance that caught the eye of the Zithar Command. The decision to invade was swift and brutal. A full-scale assault was launched before humanity even had a chance to react. The first wave of Zithar ships descended from the heavens, darkening the sky. With their vast shadows, their weapons unleashed a wave of destruction that tore through the most powerful cities of Earth. In mere hours, the initial chaos was overwhelming. Millions perished in the first moments of the invasion. The world's governments scrambled to respond, but they were outmatched from the start. As the Zithar forces established a foothold across the globe, they quickly saw humanity for what it was: at first, a fragile species clinging to survival. But even in the aftermath of devastation, the humans didn't break. They didn't surrender. They didn't flee to the shadows. They began to fight back in ways no one expected. The first signs of resistance came from New York City. A group of civilians and military survivors took refuge in the ruins of their city, and from there they began to strike back against the invaders, not with advanced technology, but with the sheer will to survive. Their tactics were unconventional, chaotic, but effective. The Zithar forces found themselves tangled in a series of skirmishes they had not anticipated. At first, they brushed it off as insignificant, but as the days passed, the human resistance grew more coordinated, more organized. In the midst of the invasion, Lord Sylar, the commander of the Zithar forces, watched as his fleet engaged in battle with humanity's first organized resistance. He had expected to see the usual collapse of a weak species, but instead he saw something different, something unsettling. These humans fought with an intensity he had never encountered before. They adapted on the fly, using whatever they could find to fight back with surprising ingenuity, and even when one group was wiped out, another would rise in its place. The Zithar Command could not understand how they kept coming, how their spirit remained unbroken. Xylar himself began to take notice of the humans' strange resilience. He had never faced an enemy quite like this. Their capacity to endure was unlike anything he had witnessed in the countless worlds he had conquered before. His people were able to bring entire planets to heel without resistance. Yet here on Earth, the humans fought for every inch they could hold. And what was most troubling to him was the realization that they were not afraid. Despite the overwhelming power of the Zithar forces, they did not cower, they did not give up. As the war continued to drag on, Sylar began to question his assumptions about humanity. There was something about them, something that made them different from all the other species he had crushed. What was it that made them so difficult to defeat, so unwilling to yield? He could not comprehend it, but he knew one thing for certain: they were a far greater threat than he had originally believed. In the shattered remnants of New York City, Captain Sarah Brooks stood at the forefront of a human resistance that had no business existing in the face of such overwhelming force. Their weapons were scavenged from the wreckage of fallen Zithar ships. Their technology barely advanced enough to cause more than a dent in the enemy's armor, but still they fought with a relentless spirit that no one could have predicted. Brooks had seen the destruction with her own eyes, the crumbling of buildings, the screams of the innocent, the unbearable weight of the world falling apart. But even in the midst of all that, she had witnessed something else, something unspoken, a fire in the hearts of those who refused to give in to the alien onslaught. The first successful strike had been against a Zithar supply base. Deep in the heart of the city, their forces had thought it secure, but the resistance had found a way. In using only the most rudimentary of tools, the humans had attacked with no fear, no hesitation, and had managed to cripple the base, causing a chain reaction that wiped out vital resources for the invaders. In one unexpected move, the resistance had dealt a blow that would have been considered impossible by anyone familiar with the Zithar's history of invincibility. Word of this victory spread quickly, And what had started as a ragtag group of survivors soon became something far more significant as others joined the fight from every corner of the globe. Brooks knew the odds were still stacked against them, but that first victory ignited something within the people of Earth. The resistance was no longer just surviving, it was beginning to thrive. Humanity was not a species to be taken lightly, and with each passing day they grew bolder in their tactics. They were learning, adapting, improving in ways the Zithar had not accounted for. Their scavenged tech began to evolve. They started to figure out how to weaponize Zithar technology. They turned the enemy's weapons against them, and each success only made them stronger. As the weeks went by, the Zithar began to notice something troubling. Their superior forces began to encounter unexpected setbacks. Human ingenuity had been underestimated, and now they were paying the price in the backstreets of what remained of major cities, hidden from the Zithar's prying eyes. The resistance had begun to develop new technologies more sophisticated and effective than anything they could have imagined before. Weapons that could breach Zithar armor and disrupt their communication systems began to appear in the hands of human fighters. It wasn't just technology that the humans were mastering, it was tactics too. They had begun to fight the way they lived, fast, unpredictable, and with a determination that overwhelmed the highly regimented and calculated Zithar forces. Lord Sylar, who had once believed this war would be a simple matter of planetary conquest, soon found himself facing an entirely new kind of conflict, one that his empire was not equipped to handle. The humans were not following any traditional rules of war. They were not fighting with honor or in any way that could be predicted. Each battle seemed to unfold with a new level of audacity and creativity, something no one in the Zithar collective had ever seen before. They had thought Earth's defenses were laughable, but now it seemed like every corner of the planet was a battleground. Every human had become a soldier in a war that the Zithar were losing. Back at the Zithar command center, Lord stood with his advisors, his gaze focused on the data streams coming in from the front lines. His face was unreadable, but inside he felt the weight of a growing uncertainty. Humanity was proving to be far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. He watched as another human-led attack tore through a critical Zithar installation on the planet's surface. The sheer audacity of it made him question everything he had known about conquest and control. He had never seen an enemy fight this way, and it was beginning to gnaw at him. Something deep within him shifted. A seed of doubt planted itself in his mind. If the humans could survive this long, could they truly be crushed? Or was something far worse waiting for the Zithar, something more powerful than anything they had ever faced? As the Resistance's victories continued to mount across Earth, the Zithar collective found itself in a situation it had never faced before. Their invincible military machine was beginning to show cracks. The Zithar had always prided themselves on their technology and efficiency, but Earth's resistance was adapting at an alarming rate. What had started as a few scattered skirmishes had become a series of coordinated attacks that dealt significant blows to the invading force. In the rubble of ruined cities, humans had begun to pull together, learning from their past mistakes and using their environment to their advantage. The Zithar were no longer fighting just against humans. They were fighting against an evolving force that seemed to anticipate their every move. Captain Sarah Brooks had become a symbol of hope for Earth's survivors. From the heart of the human resistance in New York, she led tactical missions that struck the Zithar where they least expected it. Every attack was an intricate dance of desperation and brilliance, leveraging every piece of knowledge they'd gained from studying the alien tech they had scavenged. At first, humanity had struggled to reverse engineer the weapons left behind by the Zithar, but now they were making strides in turning those weapons into tools of destruction. Earth was not just catching up to the invaders, they were starting to outsmart them. The Resistance's new weaponry was an innovation born from necessity. Using a combination of Zithar energy shields and human ingenuity, they had developed devices that could jam the alien forces' communications and disable their most advanced weapons. In one of their most daring raids, a group of human operatives managed to infiltrate a Zithar command ship in orbit. They disabled the ship's shields and allowed Earth's forces to launch a strike that crippled a key part of the Zithar fleet. The attack sent shockwaves through the collective's command structure, and Lord Sylar found himself faced with an increasingly difficult decision. How long could the Zithar continue this war before humanity's resistance reached a point of no return? Meanwhile, on Earth, the global resistance was beginning to feel a sense of unity that transcended their previous divisions. Military leaders, scientists, engineers, and civilians all came together, pooling their resources to forge weapons and tactics that combined the best of human invention with salvaged Zithar technology. Even the most disparate groups, surviving pockets of civilians hiding in the countryside to elite military units, began to operate as one cohesive force. The unthinkable was happening. Humanity was no longer just surviving the invasion. They were actively pushing back. They were on the verge of doing something the Zithar had never imagined possible. But as Earth's forces gained ground, the Zithar's response grew more brutal. Sylar, once confident in his superiority, began to feel the heavy burden of doubt. His fleet had never encountered an enemy like this before. They had assumed that once their firepower overwhelmed Earth's defenses, victory would come swiftly. But the humans had an unexpected resilience, a refusal to surrender that gnawed at the core of Zithar's strategy. Sylar's commanders pressed for more aggressive tactics, suggesting total planetary destruction to break the human spirit. But Sylar hesitated. He could feel that something had shifted within him, something that unsettled his entire understanding of warfare. His people had conquered galaxies, destroyed species, but this species, these humans, were unlike anything he had encountered. They didn't fear annihilation the way other civilizations did. Instead, they fought harder in the face of it. It was during one of these moments of reflection that Sylar allowed himself to watch the footage from the recent battle on Earth's surface. Human soldiers, outmatched and outgunned, had fought with the tenacity of a species that had nowhere to retreat. Their tactics were unpredictable, their strikes almost absurdly daring, but the damage they inflicted was undeniable. Sylar couldn't deny it any longer. Their ability to adapt was something his empire couldn't match. These humans were more than just resilient. They were evolving faster than he could counter. The realization hit him hard. If this war continued, Earth could one day surpass the Zithar collective, not just in numbers, but in power. He could almost feel the weight of their future looming over him, a future where Earth would become a force capable of challenging his empire. And that thought terrified him more than any weapon or fleet ever could. Sylar sat in silence, watching the human resistance fight on, his mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. Could he afford to destroy them? Or was there something far more dangerous about these humans than any alien technology could measure? The unsettling truth began to seep into Lord Sylar's mind like a slow poison. Earth was not simply a nuisance to be crushed. It was a challenge unlike any other he had encountered. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, his once unwavering belief in Zithar's superiority began to fray at the edges. The human's capacity to adapt and evolve in the face of overwhelming odds was becoming more than just a source of frustration for the Zithar. It was the one thing they could not defeat. Sylar had been accustomed to crushing entire civilizations with a flick of his wrist, the might of his fleets and weapons leaving no room for rebellion or resistance. But these humans, they defied all expectations. Where other species would have cowered or crumbled in defeat, humanity only seemed to grow stronger. Every setback seemed to fuel their resolve, and every loss only brought about new strategies, new ideas, and a relentless determination to survive. It was this refusal to be subdued that began to gnaw at Sylar's very core. In private, the once mighty commander found himself confiding in his most trusted advisors, the silence of his thoughts pressing down on him with a weight he had never known. He sat in his darkened command chamber, his fingers drumming against the cold surface of his desk. His thoughts were clouded by doubt, and he began to question the very foundation of his mission. He had been sent to Earth with one goal in mind: subjugate and destroy. But now, he wondered if that goal was even possible. "You must understand," Lord Sylar, his chief strategist, General Varax, said, his voice sharp and calculating. "The humans are weak. Their technology is crude. We outnumber them 1,000 to 1. They cannot possibly withstand the might of the Zithar forever." But Xylar was not convinced. "Crude, yes. Weak? I don't know. The humans fight with a fire that I have never seen before. Their ability to endure, to adapt, it's unlike anything we've encountered." His voice betrayed a hint of unease, a tone that even he struggled to hide. "Every battle I watch, they learn. Every weapon they capture, they turn against us. We've underestimated them, General. And now, I fear we may have awoken something that even the Zithar cannot defeat." Verax looked at him skeptically. "What are you suggesting, Commander? That we retreat? That we abandon our mission?" Xylar hesitated, his gaze drifting to the view outside his chamber, where the vast expanse of earth stretched beneath him. The swirling clouds, the sprawling cities, and the unmistakable signs of human resilience all told a story that the Zithar hadn't prepared for. Not retreat, no. But I cannot deny that something about these humans unsettles me. We've taken worlds before, countless worlds, but never with this kind of resistance. What if they are more than we realize? The general's expression shifted from skepticism to concern. "You fear they could one day surpass us, don't you, Commander?" Xylar did not answer immediately. His mind raced with the implications of that thought. Could Earth truly rise to power in the way that his people had? It seemed impossible. But then again, so had their victories in battle seemed impossible. What if humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers, but their will to survive? And what if, in the end, that would be the force that defeated the Zithar? "I'm beginning to think that Earth's greatest strength is not in their weapons or their technology," Xylar finally said, his voice almost a whisper. "It's in their will. The way they keep fighting, no matter how many times they fall, no matter how much they lose. They don't break. They just keep coming. And that frightens me." Verax remained silent, watching his commander with a growing sense of unease. "You're suggesting that the humans could one day be a threat to the Zithar collective?" Xylar met his gaze. "Yes, and I don't know if we're ready for that." His mind churned with this new realization. The Zithar collective had crushed galaxies, but never had they faced an enemy with such resilience. An enemy that refused to be broken. An enemy whose spirit was as powerful as any weapon in the universe. As the weight of this knowledge settled over him, Xylar knew one thing for certain. If Earth were to survive, they would be more than just a thorn in the side of the Zithar. They could become a force that threatened the very foundation of his empire. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the true power of humanity was not in their technology, but in their unyielding refusal to bow to anyone. The human resistance, once a small spark in the ashes of Earth's devastated cities, was now a blazing inferno that spread across the globe. Captain Sarah Brooks and her comrades had become symbols of defiance, rallying people from all walks of life to join the fight against the Zithar invaders. What had started as a few scattered, desperate pockets of survival now became a coordinated network of cells operating in the shadows, their tactics unpredictable and their resolve unwavering. The Zithar had underestimated Earth's ability to fight back, but as the months passed, it was becoming clear that the tide was slowly shifting. Brooks stood before a map of the world, a tired but determined look on her face. Her team had managed to infiltrate a heavily guarded Zithar outpost in the Arctic Circle, a strategic location that the aliens had used to coordinate attacks on human resistance cells. The mission had been difficult, and the cost had been high, but the success of this operation could not be overstated. The base had been destroyed, and with it, a significant portion of the Zithar's communications network. For the first time since the invasion began, the Zithar's grip on Earth seemed to waver. As the resistance grew in strength, humanity's ingenuity continued to amaze. Armed with salvaged Zithar technology and human creativity, they had begun to develop new weapons that could challenge the superiority of the alien forces. What was once considered a futile struggle had now become a full-blown war. The Zithar, who had once believed Earth to be nothing more than a trivial obstacle, now found themselves fighting a battle that would not end easily. For Lord Sylar, the mounting resistance was becoming more than just a problem. It was a crisis. His fleet had suffered losses that no one had predicted, and Earth's ability to outthink and outmaneuver them had begun to reveal fatal weaknesses in their own military strategy. What had once seemed like a straightforward conquest had turned into a war of attrition, one where the Zithar were losing ground with every passing day. The alien empire's technological superiority was being systematically neutralized, and their once unbreakable grip on Earth's surface was now slipping through their fingers like sand. Xylar's private moments of doubt were becoming more frequent. He paced restlessly in his command chamber, the lights of the Zithar flagship flickering as reports of failed operations continued to flood in. Earth's resistance, with its ever-evolving tactics and relentless drive, was proving to be more than just a nuisance. It was a force that could one day eclipse the Zithar's own empire. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. Xylar had spent his entire life conquering planets, imposing the will of the Zithar upon weaker civilizations, but he had never faced an enemy that could not be broken. The humans' resilience was unnerving. Every time the Zithar struck, the humans fought back harder, and with every loss, their unity grew stronger. Xylar could not understand it. They were not a unified species. They were divided by nations, by languages, by ideologies. Yet, when faced with extinction, they had managed to set aside their differences and come together as one. They fought not just to survive, but to protect their way of life. Their strength lay not in their technology or their numbers, but in their shared will to resist. In a moment of profound realization, Xylar met with his most trusted advisors, including General Verax, who had been pushing for more aggressive tactics, including the full-scale obliteration of entire human cities. But Xylar had become increasingly hesitant to pursue that path. It was not that he lacked the means to destroy Earth. It was that he wasn't sure he wanted to anymore. The humanity he had once dismissed as weak and primitive was showing a depth of strength that the Zithar had not prepared for. And now, the commander found himself questioning whether his mission was even worth pursuing. "You want to destroy them," Xylar said to Verax quietly, his voice distant, almost contemplative. "But I am not sure I can. We have underestimated them at every turn, and now they are too strong. We may win this war, but what will we have left? What will be the cost?" Verax stared at his commander, his face a mask of disbelief. "We are the Zithar. We do not question our mission. We conquer. We control. That is our way." Xylar's gaze hardened as he turned away. "I know it," he said, his voice colder now. "But there is something about these humans that I do not understand. Their will to fight. There is a power there, one that even we cannot control. Perhaps it is time we reconsidered our approach. Perhaps we have something to learn from them." The room fell silent, and for the first time since the invasion began, Xylar began to question whether the Zithar were truly the superior force in this war, or if Earth, with its indomitable spirit, was the force that would change the course of the galaxy forever. As Lord Xylar's doubt began to fester, the Zithar forces continued to retreat in the face of humanity's relentless pushback. The resistance had grown in both size and sophistication, and Earth's surviving leaders were now working together as a unified front. The initial shock of the invasion had passed, and what had once seemed like an impossible dream, humanity rising up against the Zithar, was quickly becoming a reality. It was no longer a question of survival, but a question of victory. Captain Sarah Brooks, who had once been a symbol of defiance, now stood at the head of a full-fledged military operation. Her tactics, once unpredictable and driven by necessity, had evolved into a brilliant blend of guerrilla warfare and strategic precision. She had become a master of using the Zithar's own technology against them, setting traps and ambushes that left entire battalions of their soldiers decimated. The humans had learned from every defeat, each encounter adding new layers to their collective knowledge. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to win. In the heart of the human resistance, Sarah and her team were preparing for their most ambitious operation yet. An assault on a Zithar stronghold in the heart of the Pacific Ocean. The base was a critical hub for the alien invaders, and taking it down would cripple their command structure, potentially turning the tide of the entire war. Sarah had seen the desperation in the eyes of her soldiers, the same desperation that had fueled their struggle from the very beginning. But now, that desperation had been tempered with a new sense of purpose. They had come so far, and the thought of failure was no longer an option. Back on the Zithar flagship, Xylar stood before his advisors, a growing sense of unease gnawing at him. His people were no longer invincible. Every operation, every mission now seemed to come with a price, and the cost was growing too high. The alien invaders had begun to lose their grip on the planet's key cities, and the resistance, once thought to be a disorganized rabble, had evolved into a formidable enemy. Even the Zithar's best commanders were starting to lose confidence in their ability to win. Lord Xylar, General Varax began, his tone filled with frustration. We must act swiftly. We cannot allow these humans to continue this fight. Their resistance grows with every passing day, and soon we will lose control of Earth altogether. Xylar did not respond immediately. He had heard these words before. The pressure to act had always been there, but now it seemed different. The urgency in Varax's voice, the fear that was creeping into his own mind, it all pointed to a terrifying reality. The Zithar were not just fighting for victory anymore. They were fighting to survive. I understand, Xylar said finally, his voice quiet but firm. But we cannot simply crush them as we have done with other species. There is something different about these humans, something that makes them unpredictable. Every time we think we have them cornered, they find a way to escape. They are unlike anything we've ever faced. Varax's brow furrowed in confusion. They are nothing more than primitive beings, Commander. They cannot stand against us forever. Xylar met Varax's gaze with a cold, calculating look. Perhaps, but I fear we have underestimated them. Perhaps their greatest strength is not their weapons or their technology, but their will to survive. They fight because they believe they have something worth fighting for, something we cannot understand. As the Zithar prepared for yet another assault, Xylar found himself torn between his duty to the collective and his growing realization that this war was not one that could be won through sheer force. The Zithar might have conquered planets before, but they had never encountered a species like humanity, one that would rather die than give in, one that would keep fighting even when it seemed hopeless. On Earth, Sarah's team made their final preparations. The stakes had never been higher. The Zithar stronghold was well guarded, and the plan was risky, too risky, some would argue. But Sarah had never been one to back down from a challenge. With the combined might of human forces and their stolen alien technology, they were ready to strike the heart of the Zithar Empire. The outcome of this mission would determine not just the future of Earth, but the future of the galaxy itself. As Sarah boarded the transport ship, ready to lead her team into the unknown, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. The war was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for humanity's place in the universe. And this time, they were going to make sure the Zithar would never forget the power of human resolve. The assault on the Zithar stronghold in the Pacific was one of the most daring operations the human resistance had ever attempted. Captain Sarah Brooks, standing at the helm of the command ship, looked out over the horizon, where the waves of the ocean met the darkened sky. The storm was perfect, wild, unpredictable, a mirror of the chaos they were about to unleash on the invaders. With her team at her side, Sarah knew that this mission would either break the Zithar's grip on Earth or plunge humanity into a final desperate stand for survival. The plan was as audacious as it was dangerous. The resistance had managed to infiltrate Zithar communications once again, and they had learned that the alien stronghold was not just a base of operations. It was the central nexus of the Zithar's remaining military forces on Earth. If they could destroy it, they would disrupt the entire alien command structure, throwing the Zithar into disarray. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and there was no turning back. Sarah and her team moved with military precision, each step planned meticulously, each action executed without hesitation. They had taken their time to study the Zithar's defenses, learning their routines, finding weaknesses in their technology, and using that knowledge to their advantage. The humans had stolen alien weapons, studied them, and adapted them in ways the Zithar never expected. They were no longer just scavengers of alien tech. They had become masters of it, using it against their former oppressors. As the transport ship descended toward the oceanic stronghold, Sarah's thoughts wandered briefly to the price of this war. How many lives had been lost in this struggle? How many sacrifices had been made? But she didn't have time for doubt. Every life that had been lost, every moment of suffering, had brought them to this point. The mission was clear. Earth would either rise or fall on the success of this attack. They landed on the rocky coastline near the base, their ship's engines cutting off as the small team disembarked. A mixture of adrenaline and quiet determination filled the air as Sarah's soldiers prepared for the final push. The heavy Zithar doors stood before them, towering and seemingly impregnable, but they knew the weak points. They had come too far to fail now. As they infiltrated the stronghold, the intensity of the operation became real. The halls were cold and silent, the walls adorned with alien insignias that once represented dominance, now a mockery of the Zithar's crumbling empire. They planted explosives in key locations, taking out alien patrols with swift, precise strikes. The deeper they moved into the heart of the stronghold, the more vulnerable the Zithar seemed. Their once infamous defenses were now crumbling, overrun by a species they had dismissed as inferior. Back on the Zithar flagship, Lord Sylar watched the unfolding chaos with growing unease. The Resistance had launched their attack, and everything he had feared seemed to be coming true. His forces were scattered, struggling to maintain control of the planetary operations. The humans had infiltrated their most secure base, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He had underestimated them, and now it was too late to turn back. Xylar's thoughts shifted as he considered the unthinkable. Was this the beginning of the end for the Zithar Collective? Was Earth on the verge of claiming victory? For the first time in his life, Tyler felt the creeping touch of fear, the cold realization that the empire he had so meticulously built was now at risk of crumbling under the weight of human resistance. As Sarah's team planted the final charges deep inside the core of the Zithar stronghold, she gave a signal. And within moments, the entire facility shook violently as explosions rocked the walls. The structure began to collapse, and alarms blared throughout the base. The Zithar were scrambling now, but it was too late. The mission had succeeded. Earth had struck a devastating blow. The transport ship raced toward the extraction point as the ground trembled beneath their feet. The Zithar stronghold was no more, its once unassailable defenses reduced to rubble. But Sarah knew that this was only the beginning. The war was far from over, and though the humans had dealt a powerful blow, the Zithar were not a defeated force. Not yet. But the message had been sent. Humanity was no longer the prey. They had become the hunters, and the Zithar would have to reckon with the power of Earth's will to survive. The Resistance had proven its strength, its capacity to learn, adapt, and overcome. And now, Lord Sylar knew they would never be the same again. Earth was a force to be reckoned with, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the Zithar Empire had made a grave mistake in underestimating them. The destruction of the Zithar stronghold sent shockwaves through the alien command, a crippling blow that disrupted their operations on Earth in ways they hadn't anticipated. The planet, once on the verge of total submission, was now a beacon of defiance and rebellion. The human resistance, having tasted victory, now stood at the precipice of something far greater than just survival. They had shattered the illusion of Zithar invincibility, and the truth was beginning to spread like wildfire. Earth would not bow. Captain Sarah Brooks stood before her gathered commanders, the weight of the recent triumph still hanging in the air. The mission had succeeded beyond all expectations, but the cost had been high. Many lives had been lost, and there was no time to mourn. The war was far from over, and the next phase of the fight would determine whether humanity could turn its newfound strength into a lasting victory. "We've made our mark," Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "But we're not done yet. The Zithar may have been knocked back, but they are not finished. They will regroup, they will retaliate, and we have to be ready for that. Our goal remains the same: to drive them off our world, to reclaim every inch of this planet, and to ensure that they never return." The room erupted into murmurs of agreement. There was no fear in the eyes of those assembled, only determination. The war had transformed them all, from survivors to warriors, from victims to victors. And as Sarah looked around the room, she knew that humanity had finally embraced its true potential. Meanwhile, aboard the Zithar flagship, Lord Sylar stood in silence, watching the reports flood in. The destruction of the stronghold had been a catastrophic loss for the Zithar, and the ripple effects were being felt across their empire. But what truly unsettled Sylar was not the loss of territory or resources. It was the knowledge that Earth had evolved into a force that could threaten the Zithar itself. "I should have known," Sylar muttered to himself, his hands clenched in tight fists. "I should have recognized the strength of their will sooner. We've underestimated them at every turn." He turned to his advisors, his voice cold with anger. "It's not over. Earth has struck a blow, but we will not be defeated by a mere handful of primitive beings. We must retaliate, and we must do so with everything we have left. If Earth falls, it will be the final conquest of the Zithar. If they survive, they will rise as a threat to us all." But in his heart, Sylar knew there was more to it than that. Earth's power wasn't just in their technology, their weapons, or their ability to adapt. It was in something far deeper: their unshakable will, their belief that they could overcome any obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it seemed. That belief was a force stronger than any weapon, stronger than any fleet, and it was this that had begun to unsettle him. Back on Earth, the human resistance had mobilized once more, this time with a single purpose: to drive the Zithar from their world forever. Sarah's team had become a symbol of unity for humanity. People from every nation, every culture, every background were standing together as one. They had learned the hard way that their survival was not just about fighting back. It was about fighting as one. They began their next offensive, targeting Zithar command centers across the globe. The Zithar had been caught off guard by the sheer scale of the human uprising, and now they were scrambling to maintain their hold. But the humans were relentless, and with each victory, their resolve grew stronger. The Zithar, for the first time in their long history, were fighting a war they could not win. As the final assault began, Lord Sylar watched from the safety of his flagship, his eyes narrowing as he observed the destruction unfolding on Earth. For the first time, the Zithar commander understood the true nature of the humans he had once thought so insignificant. They were not simply fighting for their survival. They were fighting to preserve the soul of their species, their identity, their very existence. And in that fight, they had found strength beyond anything he had imagined. In the end, it was not the weapons, the technology, or the size of their armies that decided the fate of the war. It was humanity's unyielding spirit. The Zithar, despite their superior firepower and tactical brilliance, could not defeat a species that refused to surrender. And as the final remnants of the Zithar forces retreated from Earth's atmosphere, Lord Sylar stood silent, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he had witnessed the rise of a power unlike any other in the galaxy. Earth had won, not just a battle, but the war. And in doing so, they had changed the course of history forever.